Right now, somewhere near you, there's a switch. Flip it, and darkness disappears instantly. You've had that power your entire life, so completely that you've probably never once considered what a single day would actually feel like without it. For your ancestors, that switch didn't exist. When the sun went down, it didn't dim gradually into something manageable. It went properly, completely dark, for roughly half of every single day for the entire span of human existence, until only the last flicker of an eye blink in evolutionary time. Here's what should genuinely surprise you about that fact. Your body hasn't forgotten it. Somewhere underneath modern life, wired into your actual biology, is a version of you built for a world with real, unbroken darkness. And researchers have found direct, measurable evidence of what that original version of sleep actually looked like. Evidence that reveals something modern humans have almost completely lost. Let's start with a question that sounds almost too simple to bother asking. What did people actually do for 12 hours of darkness every single night for hundreds of thousands of years, with no electric light, no street lights, and, for most of history, nothing brighter than an open flame that had to be constantly fed and watched? Fire solved part of the problem, and it solved it early. Evidence of controlled fire use stretches back roughly 1 million years, found at sites like Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa. But firelight is nothing like modern lighting. It's dim, it flickers, it requires constant fuel and attention, and it illuminates only a small radius immediately around it, leaving everything beyond that circle in genuine total darkness. Firelight didn't turn night into day. It carved out a small, precious pocket of visibility inside an otherwise completely dark world. And that distinction matters enormously for understanding what nighttime actually felt like for most of human history. A historian named Roger Ekirch spent years combing through an unusual kind of historical evidence to figure out how people before industrial lighting actually experienced their nights. And what he found reshaped how sleep researchers think about human biology. Ekirch searched thousands of historical documents, court records, diaries, medical texts, literature spanning centuries, specifically looking for references to sleep patterns. And he found something remarkably consistent, appearing again and again across wildly different cultures, time periods, and social classes, a pattern almost nobody today would recognize from their own experience. People didn't sleep in one continuous block through the night. They slept in two distinct segments. Historical texts referred to this using specific, matter-of-fact terminology: first sleep and second sleep. People would go to bed shortly after dark, sleep for several hours, then wake naturally in the middle of the night, not from disturbance or insomnia, but as an entirely ordinary expected part of the night. This waking period, sometimes lasting an hour or more, wasn't treated as a problem to be fixed. Historical records describe it as a genuinely useful stretch of quiet time, used for prayer, reflection, quiet conversation with a bedmate, tending to household tasks, or simply lying awake in the dark before naturally drifting into a second sleep that carried through until morning. That alone was a striking historical finding. What made it scientifically significant was a researcher named Thomas Wehr, working at the National Institute of Mental Health, who decided to actually test whether this segmented pattern had a real biological basis, rather than being purely a cultural habit shaped by the demands of pre-industrial life. Wehr ran an experiment that, by modern standards, sounds almost impossibly simple. He took a group of participants and placed them in an environment with 14 hours of darkness a night, roughly matching the length of a long winter night before artificial lighting for an extended period of weeks, with no artificial light allowed to interfere. No screens, no lamps, nothing. Just extended natural darkness, night after night, and researchers carefully tracked what happened to participants' sleep. At first, participants simply slept more, catching up on what researchers describe as significant accumulated sleep debt from modern, artificially shortened nights. But after several weeks of adjustment, something remarkable and highly consistent emerged. Participants' sleep spontaneously reorganized itself into two distinct segments, separated by a period of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night, essentially reproducing, under controlled laboratory conditions in the 1990s, the exact same first sleep and second sleep pattern Ekirch had independently uncovered by reading centuries of historical documents. That convergence is the entire point, and it's hard to overstate how significant it is. A historian working from old court records and diaries, and a neuroscientist working from a controlled sleep laboratory arrived at the identical conclusion through completely independent methods. Segmented sleep wasn't simply a cultural quirk of pre-industrial societies. It appears to be a genuine default biological pattern, one that modern artificial lighting has effectively suppressed by compressing the available window of darkness and pushing consolidated single-block sleep into a much shorter, more rushed span of night. This reframes something else too, the quiet waking period between segments. Wehr's participants during that middle stretch of wakefulness showed a distinct hormonal signature, notably elevated levels of prolactin, a hormone associated with calm, relaxed states. Rather than an anxious, restless interruption, the segmented wakefulness appeared physiologically to resemble something closer to a naturally relaxed, meditative state, remarkably consistent with the quiet reflection, prayer, and unhurried conversation Ekirch found described in historical accounts of the same hours, centuries apart from each other, and completely unaware of one another's existence, which raises a genuinely interesting possibility about what long, unbroken periods of true darkness might have actually provided our ancestors beyond simply time to rest. A regular, biologically built-in stretch of calm, unforced wakefulness, sandwiched neatly between two blocks of sleep, occurring every single night as a completely normal part of human existence until relatively recently in the full span of human history. Modern life has essentially eliminated the conditions that produce this pattern. Artificial light compresses the usable window of darkness dramatically, and most people now attempt to fit sleep into a single, continuous, tightly scheduled block. A pattern history and Wehr's research both suggest may be less a biological default and more a relatively recent adaptation to an environment with far less true darkness available than your ancestors ever experienced. Put together, the picture that emerges is a genuinely strange kind of loss, one that happened so gradually and so completely that almost nobody alive today remembers it happening at all. For the vast majority of human existence, night wasn't simply the absence of day, a long stretch of nothing to be endured or slept through as quickly as possible. It had its own internal structure, its own quiet middle hour, built directly into how the human body was designed to rest inside real, extended darkness. Artificial light didn't just let you see in the dark, it quietly erased an entire ancient rhythm your body was built to run on, so completely that until recently, almost nobody even remembered it had ever existed. So the next time you flip that switch without a second thought, remember that the darkness it banishes wasn't simply an obstacle your ancestors overcame. For most of human history, it was a space with its own quiet, expected rhythm, one your body still, somewhere underneath modern life, remembers exactly how to fall back into if it's ever actually given the chance.